Do you want to know the trick to making your own pattern paper with stencils? Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com, and I'm going to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. If you want to make your own custom looking pattern paper from your stencils so that if you don't have the right color or whatever's going on and you just need your own custom piece, you're going to want to choose a stencil that leaves very little white space and has a lot of space for you to ink. You're also going to want to pick an ink that's going to give you really good coverage. I recommend the Distress Oxide inks because they're a mix of dye and pigment. They dry really fast, or relatively fast, like a dye ink. And as many pigment inks I've tried seem like they never dry. I'm just not a big fan personally, but I'm sure there are great ones out there. They give really good coverage with the pigment ink, but the Distress Oxide inks dry better. So they're my number one recommendation because if I'm creating my own pattern paper, I want to lay on a really thick, heavy layer. I also recommend if you're having trouble because the stencil lines are going to be thinner from the amount of space you want to fill in, you might want to use something like a pixie spray to hold your stencil down to your cardstock. I find that tape often does the trick. I just lay some low tack painter's tape on my stencil and, tape it to my cardstock, and that usually does it. But if you're finding that your stencil is even finer or there's a lot of curves or something, a temporary adhesive spray can be great too. You can see the tape that I used here as I peel it off, and I did mask off a bit so that I could have a focal point on my card today. I am going to be making a Hanukkah card today, and I used the Fawn Love You LATKE stamp set, and I picked the Love You LATKE sentiment as well because I'm going to be coloring in that image from the stamp set. I can take my banner die that I think I want to use and lay it over the sentiment to make sure that it's going to fit. Then I wanted to heat emboss this because I'm using this navy cardstock. I want to apply my embossing powder bag. Even though I applied it carefully and I tapped it off here, I did find that I still had a stray bit of embossing powder. I used a craft knife to kind of scrape it away, and that helped quite a bit. The other thing that I want to share is when you're making your own custom pattern paper look, I really recommend more than one color too, because often if you see a pattern paper, a lot of times they have that ombre look. That is really popular with them, and so I think it adds more interest. And even if it's not to mimic any particular paper, because there certainly are some that are all solid, I think it gives it a little bit more interest. I'm going to be coloring the pan to look like a cast iron pan, so I'm just going to use some cool gray and make it look basically black, but adding some shadows in because otherwise it would just look like a big black blob if I colored it solid black. I put my shadows generally towards the edge, and then I put my shadow behind the lip of the pan as well, and just a little bit on the inside of the handle. And then for coloring in the latkes, I looked at some pictures online to get an idea, and I picked out 3 seemingly random colors because there's one that's a brown, one that's an orange, one that's a yellow, but I wanted to create that look of like the crispy edges. And so I added the EO9 towards the edges, and then I tried to kind of like flick in the colors a little bit so it looked like the individual strips of potato and look a little bit more authentic. I did fussy cut these out because I don't have the coordinating dies, and if you don't use a stamp set very often, it can be great to just rely on your fussy cutting for those or use something like a ScanNCut. Then I took a black brush tip marker and I traced around the edges so that even though it was fussy cut, it had a really finished look. Then I'm ready to add my sentiment, which I will pop up, but then the image I will glue directly down. I'll place it on top of a navy mat. If you found this video inspiring, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community. Subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.